Hey, what's up, everybody? I am Steve. This is the Fandom Show. It's the start of another week. That must mean it's time for another episode of Mondays Suck. I know I missed the past couple weeks. I've had some stuff going on, but I'm back here this week, and I've got a twofer to make up for some lost time. Today, we are looking at Star Trek 1, also known as Star Trek the Motion Picture, and Star Trek 9, also known as Star Trek Insurrection. It's going to be a lot of fun, so let's go ahead and jump into it. So, Star Trek the Motion Picture, released in the late 1970s, the first ever, of course, Star Trek movie, and it's got a bit of a contentious response among Star Trek fans. There's not many people that absolutely love it. I own this movie on DVD. I've watched it dozens of times, and I think the best assessment that I could give it would be that it's like woefully average. It's not completely terrible, but it's not great, and it's really not what you would expect from the first ever Star Trek movie. So, like, what was up with the gray uniforms? I don't know. I'm glad they chucked those and switched to the red uniforms for the rest of the movies, because that was just no good. So the storyline for Star Trek the Motion Picture, Kirk is an admiral now, and the Enterprise is under the command of a guy named Decker. And there's a probe named V'Ger that shows up, and basically Starfleet doesn't know if it's coming to attack us or check us out, or if it's hostile or not. So, like, okay, we're going to send the Enterprise to go check things out. Well, Kirk decides he wants to take over the Enterprise. He wants to command it for this mission. And Decker's like, what the heck, man? You don't think I can handle this? For whatever reason, Kirk decides, I want my ship back for this mission, so take a seat. I don't really get it, but that's where they went with it. So V'Ger is actually the Voyager probe, which was sent by humans to explore the far reaches of the galaxy decades ago. Still out there to this day. And within the Star Trek storyline, the idea is that an alien species has found the probe, heavily modified it, and sent it back our way. The special effects are okay from the time. They're nothing spectacular. Fun fact, the theme from Star Trek the Motion Picture is actually more popularly known as the theme from Star Trek The Next Generation. Because when they were making Next Generation, they decided to reuse the Jerry Goldsmith theme from the motion picture. So if you've never seen the original Star Trek movie and you throw it on, you might be wondering why they're suddenly using the Next Generation theme. Well, it's actually the original motion picture theme that the Next Generation reused. So, random bit of trivia there. But, you know, like I said, I've watched this movie dozens of times, and I can't even think of many memorable scenes. The only one there's two that immediately come into my head. The scene where Kirk tells Decker that he's taking command of the Enterprise, and Decker gets pissed at him. And another scene where Spock and Kirk, and I think maybe Decker, are basically spacewalking out on V'Ger and try to figure out what the deal is. And I don't know, there's just not a whole lot there. It felt like nothing was clicking, to be perfectly honest with you. Now, a little bit of backstory on Star Trek 1. In the 1970s, the people who make Star Trek were trying to get a second TV show going that was called Star Trek Phase 2. For a variety of reasons, that never happened. Star Wars comes out in the theaters, and all of a sudden, there's a boom for sci-fi. So the makers of Star Trek were like, well, let's go ahead and make a Star Trek movie then and try to, ride some of that success. The problem is that television and film are two very different mediums, and a lot of times what works for one doesn't really work so well for the other. And it kind of felt like with the original motion picture that they tried to graft a television episode onto the movie. It didn't feel as, I think, epic as it should have. But one cool thing about the movie, within the Star Trek canon, it has been retroactively stated that the species that modified V'Ger and sent it back our way was the Borg. So definitely some cool points for that. But not much else going on in this movie. Moving on, Star Trek 9, also known as Star Trek Insurrection. This was the third movie featuring the Next Generation cast. It followed Star Trek First Contact, which was the most financially successful Star Trek movie of all time at that point. So it had some pretty big shoes to fill, pretty big movie there to follow up. It was released in 1998. And the story behind Insurrection is there's 600 people living on a planet in Federation space. And there's something in this planet's atmosphere that basically makes them live forever. Not only do they live forever, they don't age. It just keeps them perpetually healthy. So Starfleet teams up with an alien species to basically harvest this stuff, to use it for medical purposes and to help many, many, many more people than just the 600 that are on this planet. They're like, well, in order to do this, we've got to evacuate the 600 people off this planet, and we're going to do it whether they want to come or not. And Picard's like, well, no, I'm not going to let you do that. Starfleet's like, well, we're going to do that. Picard's like, no, I'm not going to let you do that. Starfleet's like, well, we outrank you, we're going to do that. We order the Enterprise over here, get out of our way. Picard's like, nah, bro, not doing that. So he beams down to the planet's surface with, of course, most of his crew, and they do everything they can to prevent this harvesting from taking place to save the planet. All in all, it's okay. I mean, it's not unentertaining. It just, one of the major criticisms about the movie was that it felt like an overly long episode of the television series, and I certainly agree with that. You know, it didn't feel as epic to me as First Contact did. It didn't feel like I was watching a huge Star Trek movie. It was more like a glamorized two-parter from the show. The storyline was okay, but it just really wasn't that cool, to be honest with you. And another major complaint levied against this movie is that it completely ignores the Dominion War. Now, if you don't watch Star Trek, the Dominion War was something that happened on Deep Space Nine between 1996 and 1999. Now, of course, Insurrection came out in 1998, which is right in the thick of this. Now, the Dominion War was a massive war in the Alpha Quadrant between the Federation, the Klingons, the Romulans, and a couple other species that I can think of against the Dominion and the Cardassians. This was a massive story arc in Deep Space Nine, considered one of the best story arcs in Star Trek history, and yet the movie pretty much completely ignored it. Like, why would you do that? And what makes this even weirder is that the guy behind the movie is Michael Piller, who was also the guy behind Deep Space Nine. You know, you have this massive war going on, all these amazing stories to mine. I know I constantly thought, man, I wonder what Picard and the Enterprise were up to during the war, because you know they were involved in some stuff. So you have all this wonderful creative material to mine, and yet you don't do it. And the other thing is, if you had done a Dominion War story, you could have done a crossover with some of the Deep Space Nine characters. I personally think that it's criminal that none of the characters from Star Trek Deep Space Nine ever got into a movie. I mean, that was a great series, and if you ask me, they deserved it. But, you know, I think missing the Dominion War was a huge mistake for Insurrection. Again, you had so much good story material to mine there, and you just completely ignore it. And it's like, we get this other random story. It's like, I really don't get it. And what more can you say? But that's our look today at Star Trek The Motion Picture and Star Trek Insurrection. We will be back next week with more stuff that sucks, and our next full episode on Animal Crossing is coming out very soon, so stay tuned for that. Thanks as always for watching, guys, and have a great night.